Most of us think history is pretty straightforward. Someone has a brilliant idea, builds something that changes the world, and their name ends up in the history books forever. But that's almost never how it actually happens. The person who gets remembered isn't always the person who made the breakthrough. Sometimes it's the one who filed the patent first. Sometimes it's the one with the better lawyers. Sometimes it's the one with enough money to survive years of lawsuits. And sometimes it's simply the person whose company became powerful enough to rewrite the story. There are inventors who changed the modern world and died almost completely unknown. Others watched someone else become famous for work they'd started decades earlier. One man on this list lost recognition because he couldn't afford to pay a $10 patent renewal fee. Another one in court twice, and still spent the rest of history watching someone else get the applause. The strange part isn't that history made mistakes. History always simplifies. Thousands of experiments become one eureka moment. Teams become lone geniuses. Years of failure become a single photograph in a textbook. We like stories with one inventor, one invention, and one happy ending, even when reality refuses to cooperate. So today, we're going back through 5 inventions almost everyone thinks they know, separating the legends from the documents, the myths from the patents, and the names in the textbooks from the people who were actually there first. Because by the end of this list, you may not just look at these inventions differently, you may start wondering how many other famous names history got wrong. Let's start with the invention that changed the spread of human knowledge forever, and with a man almost nobody has heard of. Number 5, the printing press. Ask almost anyone who invented the printing press and you'll get one answer: Johannes Gutenberg, Germany, around 1440, father of movable type. Statues, postage stamps, a whole mythology built around him. 400 years before Gutenberg was born, a Chinese commoner named Bai Sheng was already doing it. Sometime between 1041 and 1048, during the Song dynasty, Bai Sheng developed a system of individual movable characters, carved into clay, fired hard like porcelain, arranged on an iron plate, printed, then broken apart and reused for the next page. That's movable type. The actual mechanical concept Gutenberg gets credited with inventing. We only know about Bai Sheng at all because a scientist named Shen Qiu happened to write the process down in an essay collection decades later. Bai Sheng himself left almost no other trace. No statues, no postage stamps. And here's the detail that makes it stranger. Movable type didn't stop with Bai Sheng and stay in a museum somewhere. By 1377, movable metal type was being used in Korea to print an actual surviving book, the Jikji. That's over 70 years before Gutenberg's press. There's no confirmed evidence any of this technology physically traveled to Europe. Historians genuinely don't know if Gutenberg reinvented the concept independently or if some version of the idea filtered west along trade routes. That's a real, open question, not a cover-up. But Gutenberg invented printing was never quite true, and Gutenberg invented printing in isolation might not be either. Number 4, the light bulb. Thomas Edison, Menlo Park, 1879. Everyone knows this one. A year earlier, in December 1878, a British chemist named Joseph Swan publicly demonstrated a working incandescent light bulb in Newcastle, England. Swan had actually started experimenting with the concept back in 1850, when Edison was 3 years old. When Edison tried to sell his bulbs in Britain, Swan sued him for patent infringement, and won. British courts and the U.S. Patent Office both found in Swan's favor on the underlying priority question. Facing a legal fight he was going to lose, Edison did the pragmatic thing. He merged his company with Swan's, forming the Edison and Swan Electric Light Company. The bulbs they sold in the UK for years used Swan's glass design with Edison's filament improvements. So why does Edison get all the credit and Swan gets a trivia question footnote? Partly because Edison built something Swan didn't, an entire power delivery system, not just a bulb. A lamp is useless without a grid to plug it into, and Edison built the grid. But mostly, honestly, because Edison was a phenomenal self-promoter, and Swan was a quiet chemist from Sunderland who just kept inventing things and letting the work speak for itself. In this specific contest, the work didn't speak loud enough. Number 3, the telephone. This one has an actual congressional resolution attached to it, which sounds like a bigger deal than it turned out to be. In 1871, an Italian immigrant named Antonio Muxi filed a preliminary patent notice, called a caveat, for a voice transmission device he called the teletrafono. He'd been developing it since the 1850s, originally to connect his workshop to the bedroom where his sick wife was confined. He renewed the caveat for a few years. Then, too poor to pay the $10 renewal fee, he let it lapse in 1874. 2 years later, Alexander Graham Bell, who had worked in the same laboratory where some of Mukesai's materials had reportedly been stored, filed a patent for the telephone and got it. In 1887, the U.S. government even moved to void Bell's patent on grounds of fraud, and the Supreme Court found the case worth trying. But Mukesai died in 1889, Bell's original patent expired in 1893, and the case was dropped as moot before anyone ruled on the merits. In 2002, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution honoring Mukesai's life and work. A lot of headlines afterward ran some version of "Congress says Mukesai invented the telephone, not Bell." That's an overstatement. Most videos on this topic just repeat uncritically. Read the actual resolution, and it's a sense of the House statement recognizing Mukesai's contributions and the unfairness of his situation. It does not legally overturn Bell's patent or make a formal ruling on priority. The honor is real. The case closed, framing is not. Number 2. Television. Philo Farnsworth was 21 years old, self-taught, working out of a converted San Francisco apartment, when he successfully transmitted the first fully electronic television image in 1927. He'd reportedly sketched the basic concept, the image dissector, for his high school science teacher back in Idaho, years earlier, as a teenager. RCA had other plans. Its broadcasting chief, David Sarnoff, tried to buy out Farnsworth's patents outright. When Farnsworth refused, RCA sued him, claiming their own engineer, Vladimir Zworykin, had already invented the concept back in 1923, despite the fact that nobody at Zworykin's own company could produce a working prototype from that year, or even reliably confirm one had existed. Farnsworth's lawyers tracked down his old high school teacher, who still had the original blackboard sketch. In 1934, the patent office ruled in Farnsworth's favor. RCA appealed, lost again. Starting in 1939, for the first time in company history, RCA had to pay patent royalties instead of collecting them. And RCA never really let go of the narrative. Even after losing in court twice, the company kept running public demonstrations crediting Zworykin as television's inventor and Sarnoff as its founder, and a lot of that framing is still what gets repeated today, court ruling or not. Number 1. Radio. Guglielmo Marconi sent the first transatlantic wireless signal in 1901, won the Nobel Prize in 1909, and became the father of radio in basically every textbook printed since. In 1943, months after Nikola Tesla died broke and largely forgotten in New York, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on a patent damages case, Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company versus the United States. The court invalidated Marconi's core 1904 patent, finding it had been anticipated by earlier work, and named Nikola Tesla specifically among the inventors whose patents preceded Marconi's claims. This is where most retellings of this exact story mess it up in a completely different direction. The popular version says the Supreme Court ruled that Tesla, not Marconi, invented radio. That is not what the ruling actually says. It was a compensation case about the U.S. government infringing wartime patents, not a ruling on who invented radio, and the court didn't credit Tesla alone. It found Marconi's specific patent had been anticipated by a combination of prior work from Tesla, physicist Oliver Lodge, and engineer John Stone. 3 names, not one. So the most famous, history corrects itself, story on this entire list is itself a popular myth, misreading a narrow patent ruling as a sweeping verdict about a solitary genius, when the real finding was messier, more collaborative, and far less quotable. Which might be the actual lesson buried under all 5 of these. It's not just that credit gets assigned to the wrong person, it's that even our corrections get simplified into the same kind of story we were trying to fix in the first place: one hero, one villain, one dramatic reversal. Somewhere there's probably a 6th name we haven't corrected yet, sitting quietly in a lab notebook nobody's read. If you know one we missed, you know where the comments are.